explore 6 gripping tales where people confront the ocean's apex predator, the shark. Each story delves into encounters with these formidable creatures, from shattered innocence to paradises turned into purgatories. Whether it's a scientist's curiosity leading to calamity or newlyweds facing mortality, these narratives highlight courage and resilience in the face of unknown depths. 8-year-old Jasmine Bosworth tightly held onto the edges of the compact wooden fishing boat, causing her knuckles to turn white from the pressure. A light breeze gently ruffled Jasmine's pigtails as the boat swayed softly on the tranquil, smooth waters of the inlet. The ocean air was filled with a salty fragrance, and the sound of seagulls echoed over the water. Though feeling nervous, Jasmine's freckled face was adorned with a beaming, excitement-filled smile. This was the first fishing expedition for her, and she was eager to hook her initial fish. Jack, Jasmine's father, looked upon his daughter's enthusiasm with a warm smile. For more than 10 years, he had been guiding clients on fishing trips in this inlet, but this particular excursion was unique as it marked Jasmine's inaugural voyage with him. The bright sun shone high in the cloudless sky, its golden rays heating the boat and causing the water to glitter brightly. Jasmine sensed sweat forming on her forehead, but she refrained from wiping it off, afraid of missing any moment of the excitement. Jack had hand-picked this location for its reputation of having plenty of striped bass and bluefish. He had dedicated hours to preparing their equipment carefully, ensuring that Jasmine's small fishing rod and reel were functioning perfectly. He had instructed her on fishing fundamentals, so Jasmine was eager to try out her newly acquired abilities. A few minutes went by without any sound, except for the soft sound of waves hitting the boat and the far-off calls of seagulls. Jasmine focused closely on the water's surface, her hazel eyes moving quickly in search of fish. Her hands shook with excitement as she tightly held onto the rod. All of a sudden, Jasmine noticed a minor disturbance in the water a short distance from the boat. As she leaned in closer to see better, her heart raced and her pigtails swayed. Suddenly, a huge gray form emerged from the water, its strong tail causing a white froth. Jasmine screamed in terror as the 13-foot bull shark's wide-open mouth lunged towards her, its sharp teeth reflecting the sunlight. In a split second, a massive gray shape erupted from the water, its jaws wide open, revealing row upon row of razor-sharp, serrated teeth. Jasmine barely had time to register what was happening before the shark's powerful jaws clamped down on her right arm, the teeth sinking deep into her tender flesh. She let out an agonizing scream as the creature's immense strength dragged her over the side of the boat and into the churning waves. The pain was excruciating as Jasmine felt the shark's teeth tear through her flesh, ripping muscle and sinew with brutal force. She could feel the warmth of her blood mixing with the cold seawater, a nauseating sensation that made her head spin with fear and agony. Panic seized her as she realized the gravity of her situation, her mind struggling to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before her eyes. The roar of the ocean quickly swallowed the sound of her scream as she disappeared beneath the surface, her small body trapped in the shark's vice-like grip. Jack, frozen in horror, watched helplessly as his little girl was yanked from the safety of the boat, his heart pounding in his chest. Adrenaline surging, Jack leaned over the edge, desperately searching the water for any sign of his daughter. The sea had turned a deep crimson red, and he knew he had to act fast. Grabbing a harpoon, he plunged into the water, his eyes scanning the murky depths. The water around him was a chaotic swirl of blood and thrashing limbs as the shark continued its relentless attack. Jasmine's small body was trapped between the creature's powerful jaws, her face contorted in pure terror. Jack could see the fear in her eyes, and it fueled his determination to save her. With a mighty thrust, he drove the harpoon deep into the shark's flank, making the shark violently jerk and recoil in pain. The shark's jaws released their grip, and Jack quickly grabbed hold of Jasmine's limp form, dragging her towards the surface, his lungs burning from the exertion. Hauling them both back onto the boat, Jack frantically assessed the extent of Jasmine's injuries. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, the bone shattered and her flesh mangled beyond recognition. Blood poured from the gaping wound, staining the deck a deep, gruesome red hue, panic coursing through him. Jack grabbed a towel and pressed it firmly against the gash, desperately trying to stem the bleeding. Jasmine's eyes were wide and unfocused, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She could feel the cold sting of the salt water on her wounds, each movement sending waves of agony coursing through her battered body. He could see the life slowly draining away, realizing the urgency of getting her to a hospital quickly. With shaking hands, he started the engine and gunned the throttle, the boat rocketing across the waves. The journey seemed to last an eternity, and Jack's heart sank as he watched the color drain from Jasmine's face, her skin becoming deathly pale. Finally, the dock came into view, and Jack wasted no time in docking the boat and rushing Jasmine to the nearby hospital. The medical staff sprang into action, quickly whisking her away to the emergency room, leaving Jack pacing the waiting room, his clothes still soaked with his daughter's blood. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity, until a weary-looking doctor emerged, his expression somber. Jack's heart sank as the doctor delivered the news. Jasmine's injuries were severe, and they had been forced to amputate her right arm. The shark's attack had been brutal, and the damage was extensive. As Jack sat by Jasmine's bedside, watching her pale, fragile form, his mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that she was alive, coupled with overwhelming grief and guilt. He couldn't help but blame himself for taking her out on the open water, exposing her to the dangers of the ocean. The sun was dipping low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the waves lapping at the Californian beach. 22-year-old Dylan paddled his surfboard past the crashing whitewash, eager to catch one last ride before calling it a day. It had been a productive session with several clean walls and a couple of decent barrels. He was ready to head in, his arms aching from the relentless paddling. As he sat on his board scanning the lineup for any last rideable set waves, a dark shape caught the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he spotted a large silhouette gliding through the water about 50 yards away. Dylan's heart raced. It was unmistakably a great white shark, its massive size and distinct torpedo-shaped body clearly visible as it cruised the shallow waters. The young surfer froze, his muscles tense. Thoughts raced through his mind. Stay calm, stay still. Don't splash around. He'd heard the advice 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of being in such proximity to one of the ocean's apex predators. The shark continued its leisurely patrol, oblivious to Dylan's presence. Deciding to make a slow, calculated escape, he gently began to paddle his board backward, keeping his movements smooth and measured. Just as he was about to turn and head for shore, a massive impact sent him flying off his board. Time seemed to slow as Dylan found himself submerged in the churning water, coming face to face with the great white. Its jaws were open wide, rows of razor-sharp teeth glistening as it lunged towards him. Instinctively, Dylan raised his arms to protect his head, feeling the creature's powerful jaws clamp down on his right forearm. Searing pain shot through his body as the shark thrashed violently, tearing into his flesh. Dylan let out a muffled scream, bubbles escaping his mouth as he struggled to break free. He could feel the bone in his arm beginning to crack under the immense pressure. Summoning every ounce of strength, he managed to land a few heavy blows to the side of the shark's head. The creature released its grip but quickly went in for another attack. This time, its massive jaws clamped down on Dylan's left thigh, ripping through muscle and tendon. The pain was excruciating, but Dylan refused to give in. He continued to strike the shark, his fists pummeling its sensitive snout. After what felt like an eternity, the great white finally broke off the assault and retreated into the murky depths. Dazed and bleeding heavily, Dylan struggled to stay afloat. He could feel the warm blood gushing from his wounds, the seawater stinging the raw, exposed flesh. Desperately, he began to paddle towards the shore, leaving a trail of crimson in his wake. Onlookers on the beach watched in horror as the injured surfer fought to reach the safety of land. Several bystanders immediately called emergency services, while others raced into the water to try and assist Dylan. By the time he finally collapsed onto the sand, Dylan was barely conscious. Paramedics rushed to his aid, quickly assessing the extent of his injuries. His right arm hung limply, the bone visible through the shredded skin and muscle. His left leg was a mangled mess, the shark's powerful jaws having ripped away a significant portion of flesh and muscle. The medical team worked quickly to stem the bleeding and stabilize Dylan before rushing him to the nearest hospital. Along the way, he drifted in and out of consciousness, the memory of the attack playing over and over in his mind. In the emergency room, the doctors fought to save Dylan's severely damaged limbs. After several hours of intense surgery, they were able to repair the worst of the injuries, though it was clear he faced a long and difficult road to recovery. When Dylan finally awoke, groggy from the anesthesia, the reality of what had happened hit him hard. The pain was excruciating, and he let out an anguished cry upon seeing the extent of the damage to his arm and leg. In the days that followed, Dylan's condition slowly improved, though the physical and psychological trauma of the attack weighed heavily on him. He was racked with nightmares, the image of the shark's gaping jaws forever seared into his memory. It was during one of his physical therapy sessions that Dylan met Emily, a marine biologist who had been following the case closely. She had come to the hospital to offer her support and expertise, hoping to assist in Dylan's recovery process. Initially, Dylan was wary of the stranger, but as Emily shared her deep passion for shark conservation, he found himself captivated. She explained how great whites, despite their fearsome reputation, played a vital role in the delicate balance of marine ecosystems. Dylan listened intently, his perspective slowly shifting as he began to see the sharks in a new light. Over the following weeks, Emily visited Dylan regularly, offering encouragement and guidance as he navigated his rehabilitation. Their conversations delved deeper, touching on the complex relationship between humans and the ocean's apex predators. Dylan, once terrified of the creature that had nearly taken his life, now found himself fascinated by these magnificent animals. As his recovery progressed, Dylan's determination to make a difference grew. With Emily's support, he began to volunteer at the local aquarium, educating visitors about the importance of shark conservation. He also started speaking out against the sensationalized media coverage that often fueled irrational fear and hatred towards these misunderstood creatures. It was a long and arduous journey, but Dylan's passion for the cause only deepened with time. He underwent numerous surgeries and physical therapy sessions, slowly regaining the use of his injured limbs. Though he would forever bear the scars of the attack, both physical and emotional, Dylan found a newfound sense of purpose. Years later, Dylan stood on the very same beach where the attack had occurred, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Next to him, Emily smiled, her hand intertwined with his. Together, they watched as a great white shark gracefully breached the surface, a testament to the power and beauty of these magnificent predators. The inky blackness of the night enveloped the Great Barrier Reef as 38-year-old marine biologist Erica Price descended beneath the waves. Her dive light pierced the darkness, casting an eerie glow over the vibrant coral and schools of nocturnal sea creatures that had emerged to feed. Erica was conducting a survey of the reef's nighttime inhabitants, a passion project that had taken her years to gain approval for. She moved silently, her eyes scanning the reef for any signs of rare or unusual species. This was her element. The ocean, with all its mysteries and wonders, was where she felt most at home. As she drifted over a crevice, a dark shape caught the corner of her eye. Turning her head, Erica spotted a sleek gray form gliding through the water. It was a shark, a species she recognized as a normally docile blacktip reef shark, but something about its movement seemed off, more erratic and agitated than usual. Curiosity piqued, Erica began to follow the shark, carefully maintaining a safe distance as she observed its behavior. The shark's fins were held rigid, and its movements were jerky and unpredictable. It seemed distressed, its usual grace and fluidity replaced by an uncharacteristic aggression. Suddenly, the shark turned and charged directly at Erica. She barely had time to react before the powerful predator slammed into her, its jaws clamping down on her right leg. Searing pain shot through her body as the shark's razor-sharp teeth tore into her flesh. Erica let out a muffled scream, bubbles streaming from her regulator as she desperately tried to break free. She could feel the bone in her leg cracking under the immense force of the shark's bite. Adrenaline surging, she began to strike at the shark's head, but its grip only tightened. Thrashing wildly, the shark began to drag Erica deeper into the reef. She clawed at its eyes and gill slits, trying in vain to force the predator to release its hold. Her lungs burned as she struggled to maintain control of her breathing, the panic of the situation threatening to overwhelm her. As the shark continued its relentless attack, Erica's vision began to blur. She could feel herself growing weaker, the loss of blood taking its toll. Just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, the shark suddenly released its grip and darted away. Disoriented and in agony, Erica frantically tried to swim back to the surface. But with her severely injured leg, the effort was agonizingly slow. She could feel the blackness closing in, her body desperate for air. With her last ounce of strength, Erica reached for the inflator on her buoyancy control device, desperate to reach the surface. As the air filled her suit, she began to rise, her mind racing as she prayed she would make it in time. The journey to the surface felt like an eternity, each stroke a battle against the crushing darkness and the searing pain in her mangled leg. Finally, Erica's head broke the surface, and she gulped in the precious air, coughing and sputtering. Disoriented and dazed, she frantically looked around, realizing to her horror that she was stranded on a small, isolated reef, barely big enough to accommodate her. The nearest shore was miles away, and with her severe injury, there was no way she could swim that distance. As the adrenaline began to wear off, the full extent of Erica's predicament sank in. She was alone, injured, and trapped in this tiny, fragile ecosystem, completely at the mercy of the ocean's unforgiving power. Shivering in the cool night air, Erica tried to assess the damage to her leg. The shark's powerful jaws had torn a massive gash, exposing the bone and muscle beneath. Blood continued to flow freely, and she knew she had to act quickly to prevent further blood loss and infection. Reaching into her dive bag, Erica retrieved a first aid kit and a length of sturdy rope. With trembling hands, she tightened a tourniquet around her thigh, wincing in pain as she applied pressure to the wound. She then used the rope to fashion a makeshift splint, immobilizing her leg to prevent further injury. As she worked, Erica's mind raced, trying to make sense of the shark's bizarre and violent behavior. Normally, black-tip reef sharks were known for their docility, rarely attacking humans unless provoked. Something must have been seriously wrong for the creature to have turned so aggressively. Exhausted and disoriented, Erica collapsed onto the reef, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of rescue. The vast expanse of the ocean seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of her isolation and vulnerability. Through the long, agonizing hours of the night, Erica fought to stay conscious, her strength slowly ebbing away. She knew that if she succumbed to the darkness, she might never wake up. Forcing herself to remain alert, she turned her attention to the delicate ecosystem around her, using her considerable knowledge of marine biology to keep herself grounded. The reef was a fragile, intricate web of life, teeming with a dazzling array of creatures. Erica watched as small reef fish darted among the coral, while larger predators patrolled the periphery. She marveled at the resilience and adaptability of these organisms, their ability to thrive in such a harsh and unforgiving environment. As the first glimmers of dawn began to appear on the horizon, Erica heard the distant sound of a boat engine. Mustering the last of her strength, she frantically waved her dive light, desperate to attract the attention of her would-be rescuers. To her relief, the boat drew closer, and she soon found herself surrounded by a team of concerned divers and Coast Guard personnel. They quickly assessed her injuries and administered first aid before carefully transporting her to a nearby hospital. In the days that followed, Erica's recovery was slow and painful, both physically and emotionally. The trauma of the attack had left her shaken, and she struggled to come to terms with the fragility of her existence in the face of the ocean's raw power. But as she healed, Erica found solace in her work, diving deeper into the mystery of the shark's bizarre behavior. Through her research, she discovered that the black-tip reef shark had been exhibiting signs of a previously unknown neurological disorder caused by the accumulation of a potent neurotoxin in the local ecosystem. Armed with this knowledge, Erica dedicated herself to raising awareness and advocating for greater protection of the Great Barrier Reef. She knew that the ocean's delicate balance was constantly under threat, and that respect for its mysteries and unforgiving nature was essential for the survival of both marine life and humanity. The warm turquoise waters of Kealakekua Bay in Hawaii shimmered under the midday sun as 28-year-old Sandy and her husband, 30-year-old Rusty Harlow, waded into the cove, eager to explore the vibrant underwater world. It was the first day of their dream honeymoon, and the newlyweds were elated to be surrounded by the natural beauty of the Hawaiian Islands. As they donned their snorkel gear and plunged beneath the surface, they marveled at the abundance of colorful fish and coral that thrived in the protected marine sanctuary. Drifting effortlessly side by side, Sandy and Rusty followed the contours of the rocky seafloor, their eyes darting excitedly from one stunning sight to the next. The rhythmic sound of their breathing through the snorkel tubes created a calming soundtrack to their underwater exploration. Suddenly, a dark shadow appeared in the distance, rapidly approaching their location. Sandy felt a jolt of fear as she recognized the distinct silhouette of a large shark. Instinctively, she reached out and grabbed Rusty's hand, signaling him to stay close. The shark's massive form grew larger with each passing second, and Sandy could feel her heart pounding in her chest. As the predator drew nearer, she could make out its slate-gray skin and powerful torpedo-shaped body. It was an 11-foot tiger shark, one of the most dangerous species in the ocean. Without warning, the shark launched itself towards them, its massive jaws open wide. Sandy barely had time to react before it slammed into Rusty, clamping down on his right leg with bone-crushing force. The sickening crunch of bone and the agonized screams that escaped Rusty's regulator sent a chill down Sandy's spine. She watched in horror as the shark thrashed violently, tearing into her husband's flesh with every violent shake of its head. Instinctively, Sandy began to strike at the shark's sensitive snout, her fists pummeling the predator's face in a desperate attempt to make it release its grip. But the powerful beast seemed unfazed, its singular focus on tearing Rusty to shreds. As the shark continued its relentless assault, Sandy could see life draining from her husband's eyes. Blood was gushing from the savage wound, clouding the water around them in a crimson haze. Rusty's movements grew weaker, his strength ebbing away with every second. Filled with primal rage and terror, Sandy clawed at the shark's eyes, trying to open its jaws. But the creature's grip was like a vice, its teeth sinking deeper into Rusty's leg with each passing moment. Suddenly, the shark released its hold and backed away, its dark eyes fixed on Sandy. She stared back, her own eyes wild with fear and adrenaline. Knowing she had to act quickly, she grabbed Rusty and began frantically swimming towards the surface, dragging his limp body through the water. The journey upwards was agonizingly slow, with Sandy's muscles burning from the exertion. She could feel Rusty slipping away in her arms, his labored breathing growing fainter by the second. The shark followed closely, its predatory instincts still on high alert. As they neared the surface, Sandy could see that Rusty's leg was a mangled, bloody mess. She knew that without immediate medical attention, he would bleed out. Summoning every ounce of her strength, she pushed towards the shimmering light above, her lungs burning from the lack of air. Finally, their heads broke the surface and Sandy gasped for breath, her eyes scanning the horizon for help. To her relief, she spotted a small boat in the distance and began to wave frantically, her voice hoarse from screaming. The boat's occupants quickly maneuvered towards them, alerted by the commotion. As they pulled the injured Rusty aboard, Sandy could see the horror on their faces. The gaping wound in his leg was a gruesome sight, and she knew that their dream honeymoon had turned into a living nightmare. The boat raced towards the shore, Sandy cradling Rusty's head in her lap, as she desperately applied pressure to the wound, trying to stem the flow of blood. His skin was pale, his breathing was shallow, and she feared the worst. By the time they reached the beach, a team of paramedics was already waiting. They quickly loaded Rusty onto a stretcher and rushed him to the nearest hospital, Sandy following close behind, her hand gripping his tightly. Sandy paced the waiting room in the frantic hours that followed, her mind consumed by a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. The doctors had immediately rushed Rusty into emergency surgery, and she knew that his survival hung by a thread. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the surgeon finally emerged, his expression grave. The attack had been savage, he explained, with the shark's powerful jaws nearly severing Rusty's leg. The damage was extensive, and he warned Sandy that her husband faced a long and arduous recovery if he even survived. Sandy felt her knees buckle as the weight of the surgeon's words sank in. She had nearly lost the love of her life, and the thought of a future without him was unbearable. Collapsing into a chair, she allowed the tears to flow freely, her body racked with sobs. In the days that followed, Rusty's condition remained precarious, with the threat of infection and blood loss ever present. Sandy never left his side, holding his hand and whispering words of encouragement as he fought for his life. The memory of the attack haunted her. The image of the shark's jaws clamping down on Rusty's leg seared into her mind. She relived the terror of those moments, the helplessness she had felt as she watched her husband being torn apart by the savage predator. Yet, even in the darkest moments, Sandy's determination never wavered. She knew she had to be strong, not just for Rusty, but for the fragile future they had fought so hard to build together. Their vows, spoken just weeks earlier, now took on a new and deeper meaning, a solemn promise to weather any storm that life threw their way. As Rusty's recovery slowly progressed, Sandy marveled at his resilience. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but with each passing day she saw the glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. Together they would face the challenges, and their love and commitment to each other would be stronger than ever before. In the end, the shark attack had tested the very fabric of their relationship, but also forged an unbreakable bond. Sandy knew that their love had been tempered in the crucible of adversity, and that nothing, not even the vast and unforgiving ocean, could ever tear them apart. The salty wind whipped through her hair as 27-year-old Mary Romero leaned into the tiller, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The sleek racing yacht surged forward, cutting through the choppy waves of the open ocean with effortless grace. This was her element, the thrill of high-stakes competition, the raw power of the elements, the endless expanse of blue. Mary was competing in the prestigious Around the Islands Regatta, a grueling multi-day race that challenged even the most experienced sailors. As she navigated her boat through the treacherous currents surrounding a remote chain of volcanic islands, her every muscle was taut with concentration, her mind laser-focused on the race ahead. Suddenly, a massive impact rocked the yacht, sending Mary tumbling across the deck. Before she could react, the boat capsized, tipping her violently into the churning waters below. Disoriented and gasping for air, she frantically searched for the surface, her limbs thrashing against the crushing weight of the waves. As she broke through to the open air, Mary's heart sank. The yacht was gone, overturned and drifting away in the strong current. Worse still, she could see a dark shape circling beneath the surface, a 12-foot bull shark drawn by the commotion. Adrenaline surging, Mary began to swim, her powerful strokes propelling her away from the predator's lair. But the shark was relentless, its sleek form cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Mary could feel its presence closing in, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Just as she was about to reach a small, rocky island in the distance, the shark struck. Its massive jaws clamped down on her left leg, sinking its razor-sharp teeth deep into her flesh. Mary let out a scream of agony, the sound muffled by the churning water. Thrashing in desperation, she pummeled the shark's head with her fists, her fingernails clawing at its sensitive eyes. But the powerful predator refused to let go, its powerful body twisting and turning as it sought to tear the limb from her body. The pain was excruciating, and Mary could feel herself weakening as the blood gushed from the wound. Her vision began to blur, and her movements grew sluggish. Just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, the shark suddenly released its grip and retreated into the depths. Dazed and disoriented, Mary managed to reach the small rocky outcrop, dragging her mangled leg onto the jagged surface. The shark had ripped a massive gash in her thigh, exposing the bone and muscle beneath. Bile rose in her throat as she surveyed the gruesome injury, her hands trembling as she tried to stem the bleeding. Knowing she had to act quickly, Mary tore a strip of fabric from her wetsuit and used it to fashion a tourniquet, tightening it around her leg with agonizing force. The pain was searing, but she knew it was the only way to stop the hemorrhaging. As she lay there gasping for breath, Mary's mind raced. The remote islands were miles from the nearest populated area, and with her severely injured leg, she had little chance of reaching safety on her own. The thought of being stranded alone and at the mercy of the ocean's predators was a terrifying prospect. Yet despite her fear, Mary's competitive spirit refused to be extinguished. She had come too far, fought too hard to give up now. Gritting her teeth against the agony, she began to assess her surroundings, searching for any sign of hope. The small island was little more than a jagged, barren rock with no fresh water or shelter to be found. But as Mary scanned the horizon, she noticed a faint plume of smoke in the distance, a sign that other boats might be in the area. Knowing she couldn't remain on the exposed island, Mary carefully slid back into the water, her injured leg trailing behind her. The shark was nowhere to be seen, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the predator returned to finish the job. With agonizing strokes, she began to swim towards the distant smoke signal, her every muscle burning with the effort. The journey felt endless, and Mary could feel herself growing weaker with each passing minute. The blood loss was taking its toll, and her vision began to blur. Just as she was about to give in to the darkness, a distant voice called out, and Mary mustered the last of her strength to wave her arms. A small fishing boat, its crew alerted by the commotion, had spotted her and was racing towards her location. As they pulled her aboard, Mary collapsed, her body racked with pain and exhaustion. The fishermen, horrified by the extent of her injuries, immediately radioed for emergency medical assistance, knowing that time was of the essence. The helicopter arrived within minutes, and Mary was rushed to the nearest hospital, where a team of surgeons fought to save her leg. The damage was severe, and they warned her that she faced a long and arduous recovery, with the possibility of permanent disability. In the days that followed, Mary's determination never wavered. She had come too far to let a shark attack derail her dreams. With unwavering focus and a fierce competitive spirit, she threw herself into the grueling physical therapy regimen, her every waking moment consumed by the drive to regain her strength and mobility. As the weeks turned into months, Mary's progress was slow but steady. The scars on her leg, a constant reminder of the harrowing ordeal, only fueled her resolve. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was no stranger to adversity. This was just another obstacle to overcome, another race to win. Warm rays of sunlight filtered through the crystalline waters of the Yucatan Peninsula as 32-year-old Dwayne Garrison descended into the gaping maw of the underwater cave system. His heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had long dreamed of exploring these mysterious submerged labyrinths, but he also knew the inherent dangers that lay within. Flanked by his experienced dive team, Dwayne's eyes scanned the eerie, dimly lit caverns, his senses heightened to every subtle movement and every whisper of the current. The air in his tank felt heavy, a constant reminder of the finite nature of his underwater existence. As they progressed deeper into the system, the passage began to narrow, forcing the divers to navigate the twisting, claustrophobic tunnels with utmost caution. Dwayne followed closely behind his guide, his focus unwavering, determined to commit every detail of the layout to memory. Suddenly, a flash of movement in the periphery of his vision caused Dwayne to jerk his head to the side. There, in the murky gloom, he caught a glimpse of a massive, sinuous form, a shark, its powerful body undulating silently through the water. Adrenaline surging, Dwayne signaled to his teammates, but before they could react, the shark launched itself toward him, its jaws gaping wide. With nowhere to go, Dwayne could only watch in horror as the predator's massive head crashed into him, its razor-sharp teeth tearing into his right arm. The pain was searing, and Dwayne let out a muffled scream, bubbles erupting from his regulator as the shark thrashed violently. Its powerful body slammed him against the cave wall, the rock tearing into his wetsuit and flesh. Frantic, Dwayne began to strike at the shark's sensitive snout, his gloved fists pummeling the creature's face. But the predator refused to relinquish its grip, its jaws clamping down with bone-crushing force. As the shark's teeth sank deeper, Dwayne could feel the bones in his arm beginning to crack. The agony was overwhelming, and he knew that if he didn't act quickly, he wouldn't survive. Summoning every ounce of his strength, Dwayne managed to land a powerful blow to the shark's eye, causing the creature to release its hold momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, he frantically swam towards the surface, his movements hampered by the swirling currents and his severely injured arm. The journey upwards felt endless, and Dwayne's lungs burned from the lack of oxygen. He could feel the darkness closing in, his vision blurring as the blood loss took its toll. Just when he thought he couldn't hold on any longer, a glimmer of light pierced the gloom and he broke through the surface, gasping for air. Dazed and disoriented, Dwayne scanned his surroundings, realizing with a sinking heart that he had become separated from his dive team. Alone and injured, he knew his chances of survival were slim, especially with the shark still lurking in the depths below. Summoning his remaining strength, Dwayne began to swim towards a nearby rock formation, his injured arm hanging limply at his side. The pain was excruciating, and he could feel the warm blood oozing from the gaping wound. As he dragged himself onto the rocky outcrop, Dwayne assessed the damage, his heart sinking at the sight of the deep gashes and broken bones. He knew he had to act quickly to stem the bleeding and prevent infection, but with his limited supplies, the task seemed daunting. Desperate, Dwayne ripped a strip of fabric from his wetsuit and used it to fashion a tourniquet, tightening it around his arm with agonizing force. The pain was blinding, but he knew it was the only way to stop the hemorrhaging. Shivering in the cool water, Dwayne scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of his dive team or a passing boat. But the ocean seemed vast and empty, a cruel reminder of his isolation. Suddenly, a dark shape caught the corner of his eye, and his heart sank. The shark had returned, its massive form gliding through the water towards him. Panic gripping him, Dwayne frantically looked around, his mind racing for a way to escape the predator's clutches. With nowhere to hide and his air supply dwindling, Dwayne knew he had to act quickly. Summoning his courage, he began to splash and thrash in the water, hoping to scare the shark away. But the predator remained undeterred, its soulless eyes fixed on its injured prey. As the shark drew closer, Dwayne braced himself, his injured arm cradled against his chest. The creature's powerful jaws opened wide, and Dwayne could see the rows of razor-sharp teeth glistening in the sunlight. In a desperate move, Dwayne suddenly lunged forward, his good hand reaching out to shove the shark's sensitive snout. The creature recoiled in surprise but quickly regained its composure, its powerful body slamming into Dwayne's side. The impact sent Dwayne tumbling back into the water, his injured arm flailing helplessly. The shark circled him, its powerful tail propelling it forward with ease. Dwayne knew he had to find a way to escape, but his energy was fading, and the darkness threatened to consume him. With his last ounce of strength, Dwayne began to swim, his strokes weak and uncoordinated. The shark followed its massive form, cutting through the water with ease. Dwayne's lungs burned, and his vision began to blur, but he refused to give up. Suddenly, he caught sight of a small cave opening in the distance, and without hesitation, he changed direction, pushing himself toward the narrow crevice. The shark pursued, but its bulky frame made it difficult to maneuver in the tight confines. As Dwayne squeezed through the opening, he could feel the shark's jaws snap at his heels, but he managed to evade the predator's grasp. Battered and exhausted, he found himself in a small, air-filled chamber, his head breaking the surface. Gasping for air, Dwayne took stock of his injuries, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that he had to find a way to signal his dive team or attract the attention of any passing boats, but the task seemed almost impossible with his severely damaged arm. Yet even in the face of such adversity, Dwayne's determination never wavered. He had come too far, fought too hard, to give up now. With renewed focus, he began to search the cave for any means of escape, his mind racing with a desperate plan to survive. The story of Dwayne's harrowing encounter with the shark would become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of preparation, respect, and vigilance when exploring the underwater world. But for Dwayne, it was a testament to the human spirit, a triumph of will over the unforgiving forces of nature.